Wife's continued connection with her Ab-sive ex, despite claiming to have blocked him, has led me to ask for a divorce tonight. I recently married my longtime GF, 8 years, who I'll call Amy. While we have been together that whole time, the first 5 years were not exclusive, did not live together, and for 2 years were 1,200 miles apart, though we made regular visits. When she and I first met, we were both married but in open relationships. My wife, myself and Amy's husband were required to travel for extremely long periods of time, sometimes years, with minimal opportunities to return home, security contractors. Amy is an ER nurse. 3 months before she and I met, while her husband was home on a 6-month break, she met a local cop, and started a relationship with him. We'll call him Chris. He introduced her to some pretty extreme S&M and BDSM, which she found she deeply enjoyed. Unfortunately, it rapidly escalated past anything even remotely healthy, and became abusive. This rapidly began to destroy her marriage and family, and despite her husband giving her an ultimatum, she persisted. I was unaware of the abusive, obsessive nature of her relationship with Chris until Amy's husband told me. I had noticed that Amy was becoming increasingly erratic, but had no explanation. I broke it off with Amy. A month later she reached out saying she had realized how toxic the relationship was, that she had broken up with Chris, blocked him, and if I was interested would like to start seeing me again. I verified with her husband, then started sleeping with her again. This was still very much a booty call level of relationship at this point. From that point on, over the next 8 years, we would become closer and closer and eventually marry. However, about 4 years ago she mentions that he had reached out to her over some pictures she posted, unrelated, that they had a good conversation where he asked why she had broken it off with him, and they had both reached some closure. I noted that while I was glad for her, how could he have reached her if she blocked him? Her reply was that while she blocked his number she had forgotten to block him on IG. I let it go. A couple years ago in a conversation with her friend, I find out that during a medical emergency some years back, but after she supposedly blocked him, that it had actually been Chris that she called to take her into the ER and stay, not this friend. I confronted Amy. She said that when she told me she had a friend take her she just didn't think to explain who exactly. This has remained a very touchy subject for me, for all the reasons stated. We are also no longer in an open relationship, now that I have stopped traveling, among other reasons. We moved back to the area, in the same town that Chris was an officer in, about 2 years ago. A few months ago, just before we married, she commented that I could be less touchy about Chris now that we are getting married, and after all he had retired and moved to Florida. We are in Midwest. I asked how she knew that, and she stated that she read an article about his retirement. Because he retired as a lieutenant and the first K-9 officer, that was barely possible, but I was unconvinced and asked her point blank if she had been talking to him. She said no, point blank. A week ago, I was reading an article about Belgian Malinois, and saw an article about Chris attending the retirement ceremony for his former K-9. The ceremony was only 6 months ago, and would mean he was in the area until very recently. So I dug, and I'm good at it. Now I have all the dates, times, houses, etc. for the man. He retired 9 months ago, left for Florida right after the K-9 ceremony. But there is no mention in any article of him moving, and there wouldn't be since he moved well after retiring. So I confronted Amy, and this time she says Chris reached out to her out of the blue via text and they chatted. When asked how that was possible if he was blocked, she said he had a new number. We had a big fight, and I've spent a couple days considering what to do. Right now, I plan to confront her tonight. Even if it is true that she forgot to block him on IG, why did she have a conversation when he reached out? Even if she was confused and called him to go to the ER, why did she hide that from me for years? Even if he texted her, randomly, after years, after he moved to Florida, using a new number, why did she have a conversation and tell him that she now lives in town? My full intention is to ask for a divorce tonight. Edit, her husband and I are still close. Let's call him Dan. He is still working. The more to the story is that I had a really bad day that left me unable to keep traveling. As soon as I was home full time, and more to the point laid up and not earning, my wife divorced me and tried to take the money and the kids. No need for details there, but I wound up with the kids and the money all got burned on attorneys. Amy had always been the one who had to stay home, so she and I started spending a lot of time together doing life things. Dan was glad to have someone he trusted with her and their kids, and despite me being half speed he felt good having someone around to keep her from tangling with the too bad crowd. Including Chris, which should have been a bigger red flag than it was, but I still hadn't come out of that king of the hill mentality. So the change was when I stopped traveling. Amy and I started living together, her husband Dan left permanently, I adopted her kids, and my wife divorced me, lost custody, and kept traveling, though her travels are all stateside. Dan doesn't have, and at this point doesn't want, a romantic relationship with anyone. I'm sure he still has a list for finding relief, but he is allergic to any sort of permanent situation. While he would never be willing to, and I don't want to, have me adopt his kids, they were 14 meters, 10 meters, and 8F when I met them, 18 meters, 14 meters, and 12F when I came home for good, and 22 meters, 18 meters, 16F now. He has given me power of attorney on their behalf and they all call me Dad. So, there's that. And yes, I'm sure there are a lot of people who judge all of us for the choices and lifestyle we've made. But we are all human, and the things required of the people called on to do the things that we do lead to a lot of compromises. We make the decisions we do based on the things we know at the moment. Hindsight is only useful when you start looking forward again. Update 1. I had the conversation. I told her I am divorcing her. It went as badly as expected. She and Chris have not been physical, but we got to the heart of the reason she has been in touch with him. I am exhausted, but feel like I have some clarity of mind and purpose I have lacked for quite some time. In another reply in the thread below I have my take on what she told me, and her reasons, and I won't repeat it all. And yes, this is my opinion and what I choose to put on here, and I'm sure if she were on here she would have some reason to explain how none of it is her fault. Thinking about it, the pattern is clear. She even said as much herself, but we don't always hear what we don't want to hear. All of her relationships have come through our professional community in some capacity or another. She is attracted to the men in it, and the lifestyle, or at least this version of it. She married Dan because he's exciting and dangerous, and mostly absent. She got to have the money, the kids, an exciting husband, near total independence because he was only home maybe 3 or 4 weeks a year, and because of the circumstances she could also sleep around freely. So did Dan, to be clear. This was fine until Dan spent an extended period of time at home. There was a lot said there about how unfair, unreasonable it is when one of us comes back home with zero idea of how things work, or why, and start acting as if our opinion of what home life should or should not look like needs to be followed. I get that, actually. Long story short, she was never and is not now interested in a normal marriage. She wants and enjoys the lifestyle she had, first with Dan and then with me. It ended with Dan when he came home and tried to play house. It ended with me when I came home long term and tried to do the same thing. For that matter, that's what ended my marriage with my first wife, me coming home and acting like I own the place rather than an occasional visitor. Amy did enjoy the more normal life with me but also wants the old excitement. She wants to have her cake and eat it too, so she reached back out to Chris because she did like what they did until Chris went too far and Dan was about to leave home again, leaving her alone with Chris around. Bonus excitement for her at the time because she got to literally watch me confront Chris at our home and send him away. But things have changed since then and the new circumstances mean she can hook up with Chris and do much more extreme things than she does with me while also having me at the house to keep Chris in check. Only catch is that it's no longer on the up and up, so she and Chris would have to sneak around. Maybe that made it more exciting? Almost works, but I clue in and realize they are in contact and unravel the whole thing before they have an opportunity to act on it. More, Chris definitely scratches a sexual itch than Dan and I did, do not. Dan and I are similar in that we can and do enjoy some level of BDSM, etc. But as it escalates it becomes much too similar to work things we don't want within a million miles of our homes. I'm happy to put the handcuffs on you and hold you down, but once we get to heavy impact play, cutting, or God help me CNC, the level of nope is so high it could put me off for weeks. So yeah, Chris is a better lover than I am in that regard. More, alcoholism. I know my short reply last night while tired was pretty ugly. Yes, there is truth there, but no, it isn't that simple. I was quoting her, but a lot of what she said was intended to be hurtful. I appreciate the kind questions and comments. I have tried medical marijuana, but it's a terrible fit for me. It made me physically less coordinated, but also made me feel more alert. The combination takes me from a level of hypervigilance that already requires medication, and that I am slowly improving with CBT, to flat-out dangerous paranoia. So, hard pass. For whatever reason, I have little reaction to local anesthetics, so it's difficult to treat the pain locally. The solution has been stronger meds like opiates, but since I don't have a death wish nor any desire to inflict a drug-addicted dad on my children, I left those behind completely at the very first opportunity. So now I take a crap ton of ibuprofen, of course, right? Lidocaine patches, not particularly effective but better than nothing, biofreeze, weekly massage therapy, and yes, more nights than not I wind up drinking at bedtime in order to get to sleep. I've gotten a lot of advice about this over the last few years, and a lot of suggestions. I don't imagine anyone here has a better idea, but please feel free to make a suggestion. I'm 100% open to anything that works without turning me into a monster. Update 2. I honestly wasn't sure I'd update again for a while, but the past week topped even my long and crazy history with Amy, Dan, and, now, again, Chris. If you're here for drama, wild honesty, a little bit of whiplash, and maybe something that feels like closure or the start of a new chapter, buckle up. After the confrontation and my late night, mutually agonized divorce declaration, the house was ice cold. Amy alternated between silence and tears all weekend while the kids orbited in uncomfortable confusion. I did my best to shield them. Movie nights, too much pizza, weird dad staying home for a while style explanation. Monday, I called Dan. He offered to drive in, said he had some things to drop off anyway. I didn't realize how glad I'd be for backup until he showed up with old man strength and the kind of calm only earned by already surviving a nuclear family meltdown. Amy stayed at her friend Liz's that night. To think, she said. I expected a fight, a blow-up, some drama, or at least the catharsis TV promises. What I got was news, but slantwise, like always with Amy. She called the next morning, her voice the least guarded it's ever been. She admitted Chris actually drove her to a therapist's appointment 2 weeks before the blow-up, and that she'd lied, again, about the nature of their contact. She wanted to test waters, see if he'd changed. If she had changed. Said it was closure, said she wanted to prove to herself she wouldn't fall back into old patterns. I won't lie, that floored me. Yes, she apologized. Real, near hysterical tears, but by the time she walked through the door to collect some things, she was already cycling through her next explanation. I'm just so damn lonely, she said. I wanted someone who remembered who I was before all this fell apart. Dan asked her if she wanted to stay with us for the kids' sake while we sorted logistics. Amy agreed with a wary relief, her default. Looks like my guest room is going to see more traffic than expected, at least until the apartment Amy explored last week gets the lease signed. Nothing about this feels real, or right, but it's what works for the kids and somehow even for us. I figured Chris was out of my story for good. Imagine my reaction when my phone lit up with an unknown local number. Against better judgment, I let it go to voicemail and listened. Turns out, Chris was back in town, last minute business, he said, and I just wanted to make sure you weren't angry at me. Or at Amy. I never wanted trouble. His voice, it's weird how you can hear a cop, a dom, and a scared little boy all at once. I didn't know whether to be angry, afraid, or just bewildered. I called Dan, who said, want company. We agreed, if Chris wanted to talk, better it happen on my terms. Chris showed up driving a battered F-150 that looked like it had seen war. He asked to talk man to man. Amy locked herself in the upstairs bathroom, sobbing. Chris claimed his family was all up north now. I'm just back for some legal stuff. He apologized, repeatedly, for all the drama, admitting he should have respected boundaries. Claimed there was never anything physical since that time years ago, just some mixed up texting. I grilled him anyway. Dan watched like a hawk. When I said, you know I'm divorcing Amy because of this, right? He flinched, but didn't deny anything. Here's the kicker, after a hesitant silence, Chris asked, out loud, if Dan would give him Amy's phone number. Dan actually laughed, then told Chris to get out and never contact any of us again. For the first time, I felt entirely clear, whatever drama Amy had with Chris, it truly was on her now. The guy is a walking bad decision magnet, still seeking the same thrill. I told him that myself, and he left, muttering something about not meaning to stir things up. Amy emerged red-eyed after Chris left. She looked at both me and Dan and said, you're right. I need to get my shit together. No more denials. I wish I could say that made it all easier, but as anyone who's dealt with real betrayal knows, it's more exhausting than relieving. Closure isn't clean. The wildest revelation, the kids found out some via TikTok and family friend snooping. Welcome to Gen Z co-parenting hell. My eldest, the calm 22-year-old, sat me down and asked, are you going to be okay? Then, is Mom? Is Chris going to come back? He claimed to want to stay with me, siblings in tow, for normal life. Dan, ironically, is okay with this. Amy gets regular visits, probably more stability than she's managed in a decade. We're going to keep the house for now. Amy may move out, but the kids won't be shuffled around. If she really can't manage it, Dan will step up again. He and I are both weary, but determined. Just when it felt like things couldn't get weirder, Amy's mother tried to reinsert herself for the first time in 7 years. Random Facebook message, hope you're doing well, let me know if you need any help with the transition. Amy screamed at her over the phone, like, blood-curdling, and blocked her. Sometimes, closure is just another door slammed. I'm exhausted, but clear. Sleeping mostly through the night, without drinking, for once. Physical pain is as bad as ever, but emotionally, I finally feel off the roller coaster Amy's kept running even after all these years. Dan and I have started working out a new co-pilot system, because our patchwork parenting worked for a decade under worse stress, and the kids voted to keep the dad bench for a while. Amy? She's starting twice weekly therapy. She claims she doesn't want another Chris in her life. I honestly hope that's true. Update 3. Holy hell, what a week. I did not expect to be back so soon with an update. I was going to take some time for myself and let things cool off, but as you're about to find out, life had radically different plans. After that last, icy confrontation, me announcing divorce, Amy spending long hours at Liz's, the kids floating around like satellites, I was pretending at normalcy, doing my best impression of a single dad who has his act together. If the kids noticed the silence and short answers, they didn't say much. Dan stayed several nights after his old man calm steadied me more than I realized. We played chess. We took turns doing dinner duty. It should have been boring, but this was the calm before the hurricane. Let me back up a minute. A few days after Amy came by to collect some essentials, she asked if I could meet for coffee alone. Begrudgingly, I agreed, mostly to avoid more messy scenes at home. I expected more apologies, more tears. Instead, she handed me a notebook and said, read this, then decide what you want. It was a therapy workbook. The writing was scattered, desperate, entries noting, in painful detail, every time she'd been tempted to reach out to Chris, every moment she'd lied. I'll be honest, it was hard to read, and messy, but for the first time it felt like unfiltered Amy, guilt and all. She confessed she started lying years ago because the truth makes everything small and ugly, like a worn-out band-aid. Okay, so maybe she's trying, but I'm past all that now. I'm way past trying to rescue her from her own knots. The insane part? That meeting triggered a landslide of revelations. It started Monday morning, mail in the box, old-fashioned in this digital house. Among the bills, there was an official-looking envelope for Amy. She wasn't there, but I know what her lawyer's stationery looks like. When Dan saw it, he asked if I'd checked the mail recently. No, just came today. Turns out, Amy's already been contacted about a civil suit by Chris's ex-wife. I only found out because Dan recognized her name. She's been making noise for years about harassment and coercive entanglement, but nobody ever took it seriously because Chris was well liked as a cop. This sent Amy into a spiral, but here's where things got wild. The lawsuit alleges Chris used his status as an officer to harass not only his ex-wife, but also manipulate Amy into the relationship, and, possibly, others. The suit named Amy as a witness and referred coyly to reopen communication. Now she's been subpoenaed. Amy had a breakdown at my kitchen table. Full on, ugly crying, "I'm done. I'm so effing done. Why can't the world just let me move on?" Dan was the one who stepped up, actually hugged her. For all his stoicism, the man has some serious compassion for her pain, even if she's caused much of it. The result, Amy had to contact her therapist, her new lawyer, and wound up giving a formal statement to the city. I have no idea where all this will go, my guess, nowhere fast, but, for once, it forced everybody to talk openly. No more secrets. Just when I thought he was gone, Chris texted Dan. Yes, Dan. Not me, not Amy. Weirdest, most passive-aggressive message of all time. Hope you're all okay. Sorry for the mess. Let me know if you need to talk, sober this time. Apparently, Chris has entered rehab in Florida. According to his ex-wife, via her lawyer, not directly to us, Chris finally acknowledged his own drinking problems and, apparently, decided now was the time for amends. In a sick twist of fate, Dan and I got a message from Chris's old partner, a guy we all worked with back in the day. "Don't let him back in," the text said, blunt and dark. "He's spinning out, and he's not the same anymore. Sorry." Amy, meanwhile, is mortified. The entire city seems to know her dirty laundry. She's shifted from denial to contrition to what I might call grim acceptance. "This is who I am," she told me yesterday. "All I can do is protect the kids and myself." Nice sentiment. I hope it sticks. All this drama threatened to explode into the kids' lives, but they stunned me. My oldest quietly started taking over chores, cooking for siblings, offering car rides, just picking up slack I didn't realize I'd dropped. My 16-year-old daughter, who once idolized Amy, laid it all bare over breakfast. "You and Mom are a disaster together, but we're not a disaster. We'll figure stuff out. Can we just be weird and honest now, please?" Out of the mouths of babes. The real hero, though, is Dan. He announced he's taking a remote job for a year, out of nowhere, to be around more for the kids. The man who once wanted nothing to do with settling down is suddenly the glue holding us together. Okay, here's the part that feels more like a season finale cliffhanger than my own life. Amy's lawyer called me to inform me that, because of subpoena complications, I might also be called as a witness. Apparently, Chris kept old messages from years ago, screenshots, emails, God knows what, where Amy discussed her relationship with both Dan and me, and mentioned work-related protections. Some of it is standard see ya, but some of it is pretty ugly. I've spent all week with a paralegal preparing a timeline, trying to reconstruct what Amy said, what I knew, and what might happen. Amy and I agreed, for everyone's sanity, the faster the divorce moves, the better. But even as the paperwork's flying, the reality is softer. She helps make dinner twice a week. She apologizes to the kids. She doesn't sugarcoat. She finally started regular AA and trauma counseling, trauma nurse, traumatized herself, irony at its finest. Dan and I sat on the porch last night, in the rain, because the house felt haunted, talking about what comes next. Lots of people wish they had the courage to start over, he mused. We get to. Amy's ongoing fallout with Chris triggered a massive harassment lawsuit from Chris's ex-wife, dragging Amy back in and possibly naming me. Chris is spiraling, now in rehab. The kids? Champions in the making, older ones stepping up, younger ones shockingly resilient. Dan is sticking around, quite possibly for good. Our dad bench is stronger than ever, maybe not traditional, but surprisingly solid. I'm facing possible witness testimony. Amy is, finally, confronting the entire wreckage. We're doing family therapy, even Dan. It turns out, disaster can force people into the most honest, bare version of themselves whether they wanted it or not. No happy endings here, yet. But for the first time in years, everything is on the table. If you're looking for wild, I'd say getting subpoenaed for your ex's abusive ex's harassment case while co-parenting with 2 dads and a mother finally plotting her own future qualifies. Update 4. Wow. Alright, buckle up. Things got so much stranger, messier, and, honestly, realer than I ever thought possible after my last update. If you want a perfect TV movie arc, maybe skip this one. If you want what happens when real people with a mountain of tangled history crash through rock bottom, read on. 1. Amy moves out, kinda, but life gets feral. Amy's lease on the apartment finally clears, so, After 3 weeks of lurching back and forth, she loads up a couple of boxes, hugs the youngest too long, and leaves. Except, she's back every day. She's cooking, she's checking in, she's trying. The kids see her, Dan sees her, sometimes more than I do. At first I was angry. Is she incapable of boundaries? But the truth is, this patchwork family never played by rulebook boundaries, and the kids settle into a new Amy is around. Mom isn't living here, but she's showing up routine. It's weird, but somehow less stressful for everyone. She apologizes, more sincerely, every time. She actually tells the older two, calmly, that she screwed up the marriage but is fixing herself. They nod, shell-shocked but grateful for honesty, finally. The youngest, my daughter, almost gleefully lists the ways Dad and Dan are way better cooks anyway. 2. The lawsuit goes bonkers, and Chris implodes. Remember that lawsuit Chris's ex dropped on Amy? Multiply that by 2. Turns out, Chris's business in town wasn't just loose ends, it was attempted witness intimidation. He sent threatening messages not only to Amy, but to Dan, and, get this, the principal at our local high school. His ex's new boyfriend works there. Amy's phone started blowing up with blocked calls and unhinged voicemails, which she played for her therapist, her lawyer, and me. You want weird closure? Try sitting at a kitchen table hearing your wife's ex's drunken rant about never being replaced. Dan takes everything to the police. Now the city guard dogs, freshly unimpressed with their retired K-9 hero, are calling Chris's new precinct in Florida and passing on harassment charges. His ex's suit picks up, and both Amy and Dan have to sit for depositions. Guess who else gets a subpoena? Yours truly, because apparently, my name comes up everywhere now. Chris, still in rehab, breaks no contact rules within a week. Also, he starts emailing me pseudo-apologies and promises to disappear. If you want surreal, try having an ex-cop you never liked send you a handwritten letter about the Brotherhood of Pain. My lawyer laughs so hard he almost chokes. 3. Dan moves in, and the kids finally talk. After years of ghost dad and cool uncle, Dan shockingly signs a 6-month lease on my spare room. Yes, his own apartment in my goddamn house, declaring, the bench needs depth and backup. We form the most functionally dysfunctional co-dad team the Midwest ever saw. My 16-year-old comes in one evening and straight up says, I always knew Mom was a hurricane, but at least you two are a solid roof. It's cheesy. We tear up anyway. The biggest change? The kids do family therapy. Not just grudgingly, but with a kind of weirdly mature enthusiasm. Amy, sometimes present, sometimes just, Colin, my daughter, who's oldest at home, starts a private TikTok, because Gen Z, where she makes co-dad memes. Dan intentionally grows a ridiculous mustache for the bit. We're not winning Parent of the Year, but suddenly the kids are laughing again. 4. Amy gets real, and actually improves. Amy, for all her mess, now shows up to AA twice a week. She leaves her phone in the car. She texts me after, actual gratitude, it's the first time I've felt like myself in years. She starts group therapy for trauma nurses, too, and, jaw-dropping moment, applies for a transfer to a hospital 2 towns over so she can't keep bumping into old ghosts. Her lawyer is cautiously optimistic. The harassment case is a nightmare, but the DA's office recommends counseling over criminal fallout for her, given the mountain of text evidence showing Chris as the aggressor. She also tells me, yes, off the record, about things she hid not just from me but from herself. She admits to almost meeting Chris again after he left for Florida, but panicked and spent the night in her car outside a closed Taco Bell. It's sad, it's raw, and somehow makes everything make more sense. She's facing it now. 5. I face my own ghosts. Therapist, mine, tells me I need to quit ibuprofen martyrs and finally see the pain specialist Dan swears by. I go. They give me a real regimen, actually works. First time in years, I sleep more than 4 hours. My son asks if I'm dying. You slept past 7 a.m., Dad. I stopped drinking entirely, mostly because the pain is dull now, the emotional kind, too. The family therapist asks me and Dan to make a shared values contract with the kids. Turns out, we agree on don't be a liar, don't abandon each other, and don't talk to cops named Chris. You can see why the kids laugh at us. 6. The craziest twist, a new player enters. Here's the part you can't make up. Amy's mom, the estranged, rampaging matriarch who called to offer help last month, shows up, uninvited, knocking on the door one Saturday. Dan is the only one home. He answers, bewildered. Amy's mom simply sets down a box of childhood photos and medical records on our porch and says, Amy will need these soon. She nods at Dan, says, you did what you could, and leaves, gets in a car, out of state plates, gone in 10 seconds. Amy later weeps over the photos, then lets the kids help organize them. For the first time, she lets the kids see proof of a life before chaos, her, pre-hospital, with her childhood dog. The kids, oddly, seem to understand her better. She keeps a photo by her bed at the new apartment. She goes by Amy S. Again, her maiden name. 7. Where does this end? If you want fireworks, fistfights, or a classic breakup, sorry, sometimes life is just messy, brutal, and then surprisingly functional. Amy and I are divorcing, amicably, with joint custody on paper and a keep the bench together approach at home. Dan and I co-own a house and, apparently, a meme account. Amy is rebuilding, far from finished, but sincerely trying. Chris, for all I know, is in a different type of institutional setting now. The last I saw was a cryptic doing the work email to his ex, who promptly CC'd her lawyer. Sometimes, keeping the pieces together isn't about getting everything back. Sometimes it's just building a stable new thing in the crater of the old one, and letting the kids build their own jokes about it. The weirdest part? For maybe the first time in a decade, I'm not waiting for the other shoe to drop.